An unknown enemy lurks in the shadows, waiting to change the course of humanity. Can humans defeat it before it annihilates everyone? Hello, and welcome to our channel. Today we'll be recapping an American thriller drama film called Contagion. Let's check it out.
Where are you right now?
On the bus, heading to work.
I'd like you to get off immediately.
The film starts on day 2 of the event that will bring disastrous changes to mankind. Beth is in an airport lounge and receives a call from John, an old friend with whom she had just spent the night. She is coughing and pale, and she's not the only one exhibiting symptoms. In Hong Kong, a young man is sweating profusely and suffering from blurry vision, so he decided to come home to his family. When he tries to go outside in the streets, he gets run over by a car. In London, a model feels sick, so she returns to her hotel. Moments later, she gets discovered already lifeless on the bathroom floor. In Japan, a businessman recently arrives from a flight and collapses on the floor of a packed bus, convulsing in front of everyone. A bystander filmed the incident. Beth arrives home and gets in close contact with her husband, Mitch, who works at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, and their son, Clark. She is unknowingly infecting them. On day 3, in a local pub somewhere in San Francisco, a conspiracy theorist blogger, Alan, watches the video of the businessman convulsing and thinks it may be mercury poisoning from fish and proposes to make a story about this. However, it was rejected because it's not backed up with evidence. Elsewhere, Mitch fetches Clark, his stepson, because he's not feeling well. He assures him that it will be gone before Thanksgiving and goes back home to Beth, who has also gotten very ill. On day 4, Beth no longer has strength in her body. When Mitch guides her to sit, she collapses and has seizures on the kitchen floor. Out of panic, Mitch leaves Clark with his babysitter and brings Beth to the hospital. Just a little later, the doctor informs Mitch that Beth has died. He was in denial about the loss. The doctor tries to give him the possibilities of what may have happened to Beth, except for a concrete answer, because he himself is unsure. Mitch, still devastated, gets a call from the babysitter that Clark is no longer breathing, so he instructs her to call 911. Upon arriving, he immediately runs to his son's room, only to find him lifeless on his bed. Day 5 starts in the World Health Organization Global Office in Geneva, Switzerland. Dr. Leonora gets briefed on the victims of the virus in Hong Kong and all over the world. They are still discussing whether the others that showed similar symptoms are victims as well.
Back in Hong Kong, the sick young man who got hit by a bus has his body burned, and his sister brings his ashes back to their province. But unknown to her, the virus is still very much active. It appears that not even fire can contest the deadly virus. She gets found already lifeless, still sitting in her bus seat. It appears as though she had already been infected even before the death of her brother.
In a lab, Beth undergoes an autopsy, and one of the doctors gets shocked by what he discovers. He orders his colleague to move away from the table and call everyone. Meanwhile, Jory, Mitch's daughter, visits him in isolation. He informs and assures her that he'll be fine because he's still not showing symptoms, and tries to tell Jory to live with her mom, but she is insistent about staying with him. On day 6, the director of the CDC, Dr. Ellis, meets with Dr. Aaron. He briefs her on her involvement in halting the virus's spread and the necessary steps that they have to take, as well as the other authorities involved in this project. Afterward, she departs to a convention of authorities in charge of contact tracing and regulating the spread of the virus. The sample from Beth's autopsy ultimately gets delivered to Dr. Ian, since the CDC couldn't figure out the virus they retrieved from her body. While Dr. Ian discusses the details of the virus through a phone call, Alan sneaks up to him and corners him to assert his theory that this virus is a biological weapon. He gets shut down by Dr. Ian, who tells him he is not a journalist. It's day 7 of the ongoing viral transmission. The Department of Homeland Security and CIA contacts Dr. Ellis on the situation in China, especially with the workers of a certain casino, and thinks this might have a connection with the transmission. With the virus still in play and the CDC still trying to figure out how it is transmitted, schools in Minneapolis were shut down owing to an epidemic that resulted in the deaths of a few students. Clark must have passed the virus to other people in the school, possibly to other kids. Surprisingly, there is still no outdoor face mask mandate. Dr. Aaron visits Beth's office to conduct contact tracing in an attempt to stop the spread and quarantine the one who fetched her from the airport. Mitch also gets questioned about his wife and her work situation and gets a clue about her extramarital encounters with John. At the CDC, Dr. Alley discovers that the virus is a combination of a bat-borne virus and a pig's genetic material. Due to Dr. Ellis's orders, she calls Dr. Ian and tells him to destroy all the samples of the virus. Convinced that he can solve this, Dr. Ian violates the orders and continues to work. On day 8, Dr. Leonora gets dispatched to Hong Kong to find where Beth got the virus. Sun Feng accompanies her as she interviews the infected people. She also coordinates with the local public health officials and traces it back to the Macau casino. This helped her identify Beth as the index patient, or patient 0, the initial carrier of a disease or virus. Dr. Ian successfully makes a solution for the formulation of the vaccine. This worried Dr. Ellis, thinking Dr. Ian will leak it to profit on his own, but he doesn't want any monetary reward from this. 3 days later, they reveal this discovery to the public. Dr. Ian cultivated the virus and identified the adversary they were up against. Now, they know what they're up against and what must be done. The virus is given a name, referring to it as the MEV1. Alan was not happy about this and begins a plan to feed his ego as a conspiracy theorist. Meanwhile, Mitch gets informed that he is immune to the disease and is allowed to go home. However, he was not given an answer if his daughter was also immune. Since he's already lost 2 family members, he is overprotective of her and even prohibited her from going outside and meeting her boyfriend, Andrew.
Dr. Leonora theorizes that the virus must have started right there in Hong Kong. The local officials, knowing that this will be on the news, immediately dismiss it so that it doesn't backfire on them.
On day 14, Dr. Aaron is showing symptoms. She immediately consumes medicine and calls the hotel administration to give her the names of the crew who serviced her hotel room. She feels guilty because she's certain she's infected other people and that she will not be able to finish her job. Dr. Ellis tries to evacuate her back home, but the officials are closing the borders to control the transmission. They are also discreetly doing damage control because if the word gets out, this would cause mass panic. Growing ever desperate for a cure, Sun Feng kidnaps Dr. Leonora as leverage to get a cure for the virus. He brings her to a house where several people from his village are quarantined. He reveals his intentions of not letting her go unless they're given the available cure. Alan starts with his plan of spreading misinformation. He claims that he was infected and cured himself with forsythia. Since he has 2 million followers on his blog, this misinformation spread like wildfire to the general public. People looking for salvation all gather to line up for the medicine he claims is working to reduce MEV1. As demand grows, people begin to riot and complain across the country. Worried about his fiancée, Dr. Ellis tells Aubrey the severity of the situation and to leave the town. However, Aubrey couldn't keep her mouth shut and told her friend, and ironically asked her not to tell someone about this. Of course, her friend couldn't help but tell her husband and the rest of the world. Mitch and Jory try to go on a grocery run, but were surprised to see that everyone is looting stores for food and water. Scared of being infected and the violence of desperate people, Mitch tries to cross borders with Jory, but fails. Due to the severity of her illness and the scarcity of nurses and supplies, Dr. Aaron dies in the evacuation station. Dr. Ellis appears on a television show to educate others about the vaccine, the reasons why it is not yet made available to the public, and the measures they could take as a defense against the virus. However, Alan is a guest as well, and is determined on painting the government as villains through his conspiracy theories.
Alan immediately corners Dr. Ellis because Aubrey's friend from earlier posted information about the quarantine on Facebook before it was even released to the general public. He continues to insult him and the government on national TV. Dr. Ellis stays silent because it is true that he was the one that leaked the confidential information to Aubrey.
On day 21, the virus mutated and became significantly more deadly. The CDC lab began their vaccine development through animal testing with monkeys, but none of them work. With the new mutation, the death toll continues to increase. At this point, the world has all vanished. Empty streets, airports, gyms, and everywhere looks deserted. Everyone is staying indoors because they're terrified. Due to the shortage of food supplies, everyone has gone violent. Mitch hears gunshots in the neighbor's house, and their neighborhood has become a ghost town. To protect himself and Jory from looters and bad guys, he gets a gun from his other house. He comes back to see that Jory is not home. Elsewhere, Jory is with Andrew after many days of confinement. Since Andrew wants to become intimate with Jory, he removes his mask to kiss her. Jory was hesitant at first, but removes her mask as well. Just when they're about to kiss, Mitch comes and pulls Andrew away from Jory. Seeing that Mitch has a gun and he's pissed for making moves on his daughter without being vaccinated, he flees. Dr. Allie is speaking to Dr. Ellis and points out that even if a full vaccination were developed, it would take months before it could be used, and many more people would die in the interim. A little later, she sees good news. She observes that the monkey with vaccine number 57 exhibits no symptoms. She smiles out of relief and uses the vaccine herself. She appears to be all right even after the vaccine, so she visits her father at the hospital. She tells him that she is vaccinated herself and that spending time with him will be the test to determine if it can protect people. Her father cries, proud of his daughter and her accomplishments. Allie's cure clearance and manufacture have been fast-tracked, and the first batch might be available in 90 days. Although this progress has been achieved, the virus is now responsible for 26 million deaths globally, and the vaccine is the only saving grace.
Following the news of the production of the vaccine, looters break into Dr. Ellis's home in search for the MEV1 vaccine. However, Aubrey clarifies many times that he doesn't have them. In an absolute panic, Dr. Ellis rushes home, but then feels a sudden sense of relief knowing that Aubrey wasn't hurt.
You're here because you stayed in your practice treating sick people after everyone else went home.
Alan's mind is still filled with conspiracy theories about the vaccine and the possible side effects it could cause. He plans to broadcast this to his 12 million followers. However, when he notices an unusual garbage man going through the trash, he checks his journalist friend and sees a wire attached to his clothes. He immediately tries to flee the scene, but was caught as they have surrounded him already. By day 133, the CDC issues vaccinations by lottery based on birth dates due to its limited supply. Back in Sun Feng's village, Dr. Leonora appears to be slowly adapting to her imprisonment as she is shown teaching a group of young children in an art session. Feng draws her aside and informs her it's time for the exchange. They cross paths on a desolate motorway in Hong Kong, where Dr. Leonora will be set free in exchange for 100 vaccination doses. The exchange takes place and Dr. Leonora is set free and departs with her contact. Feng and his men return to the hamlet with the vaccines. At the airport, her contact discloses that the vaccines were placebos and the Chinese ordered them to do this. This type of activity appears to be occurring worldwide, with desperate individuals holding doctors and other VIPs hostage to acquire the vaccination. But governments do not cater to terrorists. Sickened by this, Dr. Leonora stands up and leaves the apartment to go back to the village. The lead investigator informs Alan that they have examined his blood work and he was never infected with the virus to begin with. Apparently, he lied about his health, and now he has millions of people opposed to a vaccine that may save their lives instead of opting for a medicine that may or may not work. Shortly after, another officer arrives. Alan appears to have secured bail with the assistance of his millions of admirers. He then walks out of the police station, smug and proud of his power over the government.
It's day 135, and things appear to be gradually returning to normal as global looting and chaos effects start to wear off. There are now also vaccine centers everywhere. The mortality toll from the epidemic is decreasing, and people are gradually returning to normal lives. Back in the CDC lab, MEV1 is shown to be stored in another room with the other viruses that the world has overcome. The world has truly adapted to this virus, and now has the best defenses against it.
In the next scene, Jory discovers a package from her father in her room, instructing her to be ready by 8 p.m. She opens it and sees a beautiful prom dress. Mitch, who is in the bedroom looking for his camera, finds it, and he switches it on to find photos of Beth from her final work trip, which cost her her life. He bursts into tears because he misses her terribly. Jory rushes downstairs to see her father preparing the living room for a prom night he organized himself. The doorbell rings and her boyfriend Andrew, who has taken the vaccine, is going to be her date for the evening. Mitch walks downstairs to photograph Jory and Andrew. He then stands there, watching them dance. There is hope for the future, in the end. We go back to day 1, where it all began. A construction crew from Beth's firm, AIM, was chopping down trees in a Chinese jungle. While the expedition process was being carried out, a bat's home was affected, causing the bats to flee from their habitat. An infected bat snatched a banana and sat over a pig's enclosure. It dropped the banana slice, which we presume contained the virus. A random pig on a farm eats it and was then chosen to be butchered and sold. The infected meat was brought to a high-end restaurant. The head chef touches it to check its freshness with his bare hand, unknowingly getting infected with the virus. Not knowing he's carrying a virus, the chef walks to the dining room to take a picture with Beth, holding hands with her and transmitting the virus to her. And from there, Beth becomes patient zero of the virus that almost cast humanity to its downfall.
This movie is a perfect parallel to our current situation with COVID-19, and it's creepy how it almost predicted the current pandemic we're facing. But that's the fun of watching a movie like this, to learn from the mistakes of the characters so that it gives us hope that we will get to the end of our pandemic just like they did. Please subscribe to our channel to be notified when we upload, and don't forget to suggest movies that you want us to recap in the future in the comments down below.